When I first met Kamal and Ashutosh, 5 years ago, I don't remember what it was, and they showed me what they were building, it was hard to describe what it was and what it was going to be useful for. And I think they had a vision of helping everybody in the world find a better job. But exactly what that would mean in the market wasn't clear. And then we started working on this idea of talent intelligence. And that initial white paper kind of got the ball rolling. And over the last 3 or 4 years that we've been working together, and we do a lot of work with Eightfold, and we use a lot of Eightfold data, this is becoming a space, and it's becoming a domain. So let me explain what it is. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of time and talk about the economy and the workforce and what I think the issues are you face in HR. Then I want to talk about what we're doing with Eightfold in our project called the Global Workforce Intelligence Project, which is an example of what you can do. And then I want to explain what I think you can do to take advantage of this. And this is a real topic. This is not an idea that we thought up 5 years ago. As far as where we are in the workforce, I got up this morning, turned on CNBC, another stock market correction. Bitcoin's down 30%. The stable coin is down from $1 to 50 cents. We're going through another economic cycle. We've been through multiple economic cycles since the 2008 recession. The job market is obviously very, very competitive. Most of you are having a hard time hiring. The quit rate is incredibly high. We've been through the pandemic. We've been through Black Lives Matter. Your employees are burned out. I know that. We talk to a lot of you. It's getting harder and harder to hire. And in the middle of all of this, jobs are being created. And the weird thing about this particular period of time in the economy is I don't remember in my life, at least my adult life, a period of time when we had economic growth and inflation and very, very low unemployment and constant pessimism about everything going on at work. I mean, that usually doesn't go together, but we're all recovering from the pandemic, and there's all sorts of reasons why this is happening. I mean, you probably know mental health at work is at an all-time low, I guess is the word. 40%, only 40%, this is another statistic that'll blow your mind. Only 40% of Americans believe that their life will be better 5 years from now, which is a very odd statistic. So people are very pessimistic and very worried. And here we are growing our companies, and employees are sort of deciding to do whatever they want. This data is very striking. I don't know how many of you look at this, but the BLS does this statistic called the quit rate, which is the number of employees who voluntarily leave their jobs. This is not layoffs. And it's been at a rate of 4.2 to 4.5 million per month the last 4 or 5 months. If you multiply that by 12, that's close to 50 to 55 million people out of a workforce of 160 million people. That's almost a third of the workers in the United States. Now, these tend to be hourly workers or retail workers or healthcare workers, but this is, again, an unprecedented time. So what you're facing as an organization, and this, by the way, I left this out, and wages. Today, I think it was 8.2%, the inflation rate came out. There's no question in my mind from the companies we talk to that you have no choice but to raise wages. Employees are expecting higher base salaries. They don't want a bonus. They don't want stock options, especially now. They want base pay. And so a lot of companies are taking money out of the stock option pool, out of the bonus pool, and they're putting it into base pay, and they're raising base pay too. So all of these things are obviously, you're all very, very aware of this, and they're affecting HR. Now, what does this mean in terms of talent intelligence and planning? Well, first of all, as we heard yesterday, disruption and reinvention and upskilling and redeployment of people is going to become the most important asset you have. This data is sort of just striking on the way people feel about work. The statistics that sort of got to me was this one: 14%. This is from Mercer. I didn't make this up. 14%, this is about 11,000 people, just said, I'm done. I don't even want to work. I don't even want to work at all. I feel that way sometimes. Bill knows that. So what are we going to do about all this? Well, something's changed. I mean, the thing that's changed the most in the workforce is we've decoupled the resume, the college degree, the credential from the job. And I'm going to be launching a book in the next couple of months that I've been working on for about 6 or 7 years, and one of the chapters in there is about this idea that what we really look for when we hire people is fit to the work, not fit to the job. The job as defined was written down by a hiring manager, probably validated or vetted by a recruiter, put in the applicant tracking system, and then when the person comes to work, what they actually do is sort of similar to what was written down, but it isn't really the same. Because every job changes relative to the person. Every person brings new skills and ideas to every job. So even though there may be a job description, and everything we kind of built in HR was designed around fitting people into those slots, that's really not the way companies work anymore. And so we've moved from, my career being the company I work for, from my career to being the job that I have, to my career being the experiences and projects I've done, to my career being me, who I am, what I know how to do, what I'm capable of doing, what I'm interested in doing next. And this is really where we are. And we got here very, very quickly in the last 2 years through the pandemic. I used to show people charts like this before the pandemic, especially when I was at Deloitte. It was kind of like a nice theoretical future, and maybe someday we'd go to skills-based hiring, and this all sounded like a good idea. And then we had the pandemic, and 40% of Americans just changed jobs because they had to. They worked in a distribution center, or they worked on driving a truck, or they were a healthcare worker and they got moved into a new deployment. So we have to sort of design our companies around this new world. And how do we do this? And that's really what talent intelligence is all about. Now, we've done a lot of thinking about this. So what Bill and I do in our company is we're basically analysts, and we talk to all of you, and we learn about the market, and we talk to vendors, and we look at a lot of data, and we try to make sense of it. And to me, the most existential thing happening in the world of business is the convergence of industries. Telecommunications companies getting into media, media companies getting into advertising, social media companies getting into trust, or whatever they're going to do next. I'm not even sure. We were just talking about LinkedIn this morning. LinkedIn is turning into an ad network again. Not a job network, it's an ad network. Manufacturers in autos turning into electric vehicle companies. Electric vehicle companies turning into software companies. Telcos turning into service companies. Service companies like Deloitte trying to become product companies. We're all healthcare companies turning into informatics companies. So we're all going through this strange experience of it's sort of like a chameleon-like experience. We're in a company, we're growing, we're doing what we're trying to do more and more and more, and there's this funny disrupting going on that we're kind of not paying attention to, and then all of a sudden it gets big, and we say, we got to do that. But we don't really know what that is because we've never done it before. Oil companies that want to go into solar or other sources of fuel, or maybe mining or hydrogen. I mean, this goes on everywhere. So if you think about this, and there's a million examples, and we went through, and Bill and I and our team went through all the customers we've talked to, and we found that this is happening in virtually every industry. And it's not digital transformation. By the way, digital transformation is a very old idea. It happened already. We're now basically in industry transformation, which is really changing the nature of the business you're in. And while this is happening, something else is happening. We thought, back in the days I was at Deloitte, and a lot of people at Oxford University thought this, that automation was going to eliminate jobs. Remember that? The robots were going to be running the world, and there were going to be no workers left. Well, something weird happened. The opposite happened. There's so many jobs, we don't have enough people. So what really has happened with automation is every time we automate something, we eliminate routine work, and we create high-value work. So the percentage of jobs that are what we'd call service jobs or high-value jobs keeps going up. So skills, capabilities, ambition, energy, commitment are now really becoming the technical skills people need to be nurses, to be salespeople, to be marketing people, to be customer service people, to be consultants in this industry. And so that, to me, is the existential challenge that we face. Now, if you want to get a sense of how it really works, I'll skip a little bit of this. Let me show you some of the research we've done. By the way, one more thing. Reskilling is not a new idea, but it is an existential part of a business. And I think we heard a lot about this yesterday. I learned, Bill knows more about this than I do, but I learned about the learning and training industry early in my career when I worked on in an online learning business back in the early 2000s. And there's this giant industry of training professionals and training people and training tools and training technology and skills systems and so forth. But in reality, all of business is always about learning. All day, people are learning. And if there's anything I learned from the pandemic, and hopefully you all learned the same thing, is people are infinitely adaptable. When put in the right situation, in the right conditions, in the right culture, they will learn. That's what we're made to do. The minute you're born, you're learning how to read, how to write, how to go to school, how to get along with other people, and we do that our entire lives. So there's no excuse for not building a learning organization. I remember I had this long conversation with the CHRO of a very large company. I'm not going to mention their name because it wasn't exactly a positive story. And she said to me, we have probably 100,000 people whose skills we don't need, and we're probably going to lay them off. And I said to her, why are you laying them off? You have all these businesses that are growing. These are COBOL programmers and mainframe people, people working on older technology. They know object orientation, they know tech, they know software. There's all sorts of things they can do. She said, we just don't have time. And I thought, that is the wrong attitude. And I won't mention who that company is, but they've been struggling since then. One of the things that Eightfold is getting into in a very big way is skills. And so let me take a minute on this, because we've been digging into a lot of the skills data in Eightfold also. There's a lot of interest in skills technology. There's a lot of tools. All of the vendors in HR tech have skills engines under the covers. Workday has something they call the Skills Cloud. It's a little bit more complicated than it sounds. If you look at a telecommunications company, I know we have Vodafone here, if you go to Deutsche Telekom or AT&T, one of the skills they have is pole climbing. Because if you're going to fix the old telephone system, you have to be able to climb the pole safely, and you have to have the right equipment, and you have to get certified for doing that. So if you try to sit down in your company and build a skills taxonomy for your whole company, you're going to end up with 25,000 skills like pole climbing. Do you really want to spend your time building a curriculum and a talent strategy and a mobility strategy around that skill? Probably not. Where you want to spend your time is here. You want to spend your time on the strategic capabilities that differentiate your company, that drive growth, that create customer relationships, that make your company different from everybody else in the space you're in. And those are things that are not going to come out of a piece of software. You're not going to turn on an LXP and it's going to figure out what those skills are. I mean, I remember 3 or 4 years ago, I went to a large bank in Pittsburgh, and I was talking to the head of learning, and she was very, very excited about this new LXP they had just bought and all this skills data. And she said to me, I said, how's your learning strategy going? She says, oh, we've got all the skills we need to know about our workforce, and all our employees are finding everything they need, and they're learning all sorts of great stuff. And I said, well, how do you know it's successful? What's your measure of the impact? She goes, well, everybody loves the system. There's lots of activity in there. And I said, what are they learning? She says, I'm not really sure. I haven't really spent any time looking at it yet, but they tell me they like it. That's not reskilling. Reskilling is making decisions, intelligent decisions about what you believe or is going to drive your company forward, whether that be to improve performance in the business you're in, to move into the industry or business that you're moving into next, or to deal with an opportunity you have in the market, and then letting the technology tell you and the employees what they need to know to build those capabilities. And that's really what this is all about. And Eightfold is amazingly good at doing this, by the way. Even though Eightfold was not marketed as a learning system, the first time we looked at Eightfold, I thought, holy smokes, the skills data in here is unbelievably interesting. So you'll be surprised how useful this platform is. Now, one of the other things that's interesting in this world of transformation and re-engineering and reskilling is these new ideas. And one of the new ideas that's really taken off in the HR tech market is what's called the talent marketplace. And it really is a groundbreaking, pioneering new idea. I remember, going to a large insurance company, maybe 10 years ago. They had spent 3 years doing an IO psychology assessment of every job in the company. This is a big, very successful company. Building a set of assessments for employees, building a career portal, and telling all of the employees that they were going to go into this new thing, assess their skills, and find a new job. That project was canned a year later, after 3 years of effort. No one used it. No one had any interest in using it. They didn't understand why they were going to use it. It was too difficult to use. Today, you can do this. Today, you can use Eightfold or one of the other talent marketplace systems, and you can do this. You can also use skills in recruiting. You can also use skills in learning. So my point in showing you this picture is that the skills infrastructure, which I would call, the talent intelligence platform, is useful for many, many things. It's also useful for pay. We have a CHRO speaking at our conference next month who is in an oil pipeline company, one of the largest pipeline companies in the world, and they now set the hourly wage for pipeline maintenance technicians based on their skills. If you learn a new skill domain in that company, you get a $5 an hour raise. And she said it's one of the best things we ever did because we're getting all sorts of cross-training of these operational jobs. So this is a very, very important part of HR. Now, how do the technologies fit? One of the interesting artifacts of this space is that good ideas spread like wildfire. So you talk about skills, and we had the original kind of idea generators of the skills technology were companies like Degreed and EdCast, the LXP companies. Everybody says, well, we've got skills engines in our product too. Well, what I would sort of came to the conclusion of after working with Eightfold and some other companies is that we need to think of the HR tech stack a little bit differently. Not every product plays in the whole stack. Most of the core systems that you buy, like Workday or Oracle or SAP or SuccessFactors, are really transactional by nature. They're important. You can't run a company without them, but they're not very good at this other stuff. We have these, what I call talent intelligence systems. Then we have what I call employee experience systems. And then on top of that, development tools. And if you look at most large company implementations of HR tech, they actually do have things at all different levels. The big difference between this green area is those are not really just software tools. Those are really data tools. They're really data platforms. So let me take a minute on what I think is kind of cool about Eightfold. If you look at virtually any HR software company, whether it be an applicant tracking system, a human capital management system, a payroll system, whatever, most of the engineering is in the software. It's the transactional applications, the workflows, the user experience, the business rules in that software. If you look at Eightfold, Eightfold is really a data company. And if you want to get intelligent information about skills or job roles or careers or candidates and their fit to your different jobs, you really need a lot of data. That's a whole different business. Google, I think Ash was talking about this yesterday, in some sense is a data company. Yes, there's algorithms and there's software and all sorts of engineering behind that, but it is the data that makes Google search work. And the more data they get and the better they analyze it and understand it, the better the search is. And that's what's really going on in a talent intelligence system. A talent intelligence system in the red is a data system, not only a software system. So if you look at what a talent mobility tool does, what a matching tool does, what a skills engine does, as soon as you turn it on, it does nothing. It's empty. It doesn't really work until there's data in it. If you go buy Workday with the Workday Skills Cloud and turn it on, it's not going to be very useful until a lot of information has been gleaned from it that's relevant to your company and relevant to your business processes. So these talent intelligence systems, which are relatively new, and I do believe Eightfold's really sort of pioneered this, are really an important component of what you're going to be doing in your company. Now, how do you use this? Well, let me give you some examples of why this is important and why I think this will really change the way you think about what you do in HR. And the first thing I want to tell you about is what we're doing with Eightfold. So we started talking to Eightfold, many years ago, and as we tried to figure out what we were going to do together, what we realized is what we really do well is analyze and understand data. So we decided to put together a relationship where we would look at vast amounts of data from the Eightfold database by industry, and we would look at some of the most urgent job roles, job trends, skills, accelerating, decelerating skills, career paths in each industry. Because we wanted to get under the covers of these industry transformations taking place so we could go to you guys and give you some better tips on what was going on in your industry to help you align your HR function and your HR investments. And that's what this project is. And we started doing it in several industries. The first industry that we did is healthcare. I'm not going to show you the healthcare data because we're going to be launching that pretty soon, but I want to talk about banking. So we looked at a bunch of banks, and with the help of the Eightfold Talent Intelligence Group, we looked at data, publicly available data from a bunch of banks, and we looked for publicly available data for a bunch of disruptive financial services fintech companies, both of which are sort of playing in similar parts of the financial services industry, but actually going after it in different business models. And without getting into the details of what's going on in the banking industry, a lot of you are in that industry, this is an industry that's going through a lot of change. There's the blockchain, crypto, alternative NFT part of it. There's the consumer, commercial, investment banking part of it. There's the nature of the credit card processing, the credit card disruptions in the payments industry. There's the custodial industry and the role of custodians and custodial businesses in the future. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on. In fact, JP Morgan Chase has a very, very long report on the investments they're making in their own technology to evolve the bank. And they're planning on spending $1.2 billion of their own money to skill and upgrade their own technology just to deal with the business that they're in today, not even understanding perhaps where it'll be in the future. So what we found, just to give you a sense of how this works, is we look at the banks, and with the help of Hitcham in the room and the Eightfold folks, we looked at all the job roles in these banks, and we clustered them into groups, which we call job clusters. And the way Eightfold works, these were not clustered by job family, they were clustered by skills. So what we can do in Eightfold is we can just look at a whole bunch of jobs and we can cluster them based on other criteria besides the family, because sometimes the job family is not meaningful. For example, let's suppose you have a data analyst in marketing, a data analyst in IT, a data analyst in finance, a data analyst in the product group, a data analyst in the customer support group. They're all doing the same job, but they don't look the same in the ONET database because they're in totally different job families. So Eightfold cuts through all of that, gives you an aggregated view of these jobs, and what you find out is that in those big banks, about 45% of the jobs, of the humans, are in front-facing, customer-facing roles, branch operations, front office people. About 30% are in the mid-tier. This is where all the, kind of like thinking and analysis and risk management does. 10% are in administration and 15% are in IT. Okay, sounds about right. I mean, if you think about what it's like to work with a bank, it's sort of, I used to be a customer of Bank of America, and I used to go to the branch. I kind of remember what it was like. It was kind of like this. And then you look at what these people do. And what you find, I'm not going to crawl through all this data for you, but this is what you can do with Eightfold, is you can go through each of these 4 clusters, and you can, by the way, you can create 6 clusters, you can create 10 clusters, whatever you want to do in your company. And you can say, what are the skills that are accelerating and decelerating in these areas? And, you kind of look at it, and some of it's obvious, and some of it's not obvious. Some of the fast-growing areas, obviously compliance is growing, business systems, technology. I won't go through all of this because I didn't give you all the details. But this is what talent intelligence is all about. And you look at this relative to the adjacent industry, the fintech industry, and you find out, they look a little bit different. The fintech industry is almost all IT people, but they're not called IT people. They're called product operations, or they're called technology, or they're called product management, or they're called Scrum. They don't even have the same job titles. In fact, if you look at the job titles of IT in a bank versus the job titles of IT in a fintech, about 80% of them aren't even the same. Some of the work is the same, but the job titles are different. And so what we've done in this analysis, it took us only a couple of months working with Eightfold. We've discovered things about the banking industry that most banks really want to know. If I want to move into this domain, whatever this adjacent domain may be, what do I need to know about my workforce? What are the job titles? What are the skills? What are the capabilities that I need to have? And that's what we've been doing with Eightfold. What if you could do this yourself? Well, you can. And that's what I really wanted to talk about. That's what talent intelligence is. Talent intelligence, to me, is taking all of the hard work you've done in skills, in recruiting, in sourcing, in performance management and succession, and applying it in an intelligent way to the strategic direction you want to go in your company. And it isn't black magic. It's a lot easier than you think. That's what this is all about. Now, let me talk about HR for a minute. Of all of the things that have been happening in HR, and there are a lot. I mean, there's well-being, there's mental health, there's employee experience, there's analytics, there's recruiting, there's sourcing, there's brand, on and on and on. The most important thing that I think has happened in HR in the last 2 or 3 years is everything in HR is interconnected. Nothing stands alone. Your talent acquisition, COE, your talent management, COE, your L&D, COE, are all doing the same stuff. They're all looking at skills, they're all looking at mobility, they're all looking at career paths, they're looking at dead-end jobs, they're trying to figure out why we're hiring people in this part of the business and not that part of the business, why aren't we moving people? All of these things are interconnected. And that means that you have to have intelligence and data and strategy to pull all these pieces together. Relative to skills, it's interesting how the world of skills has changed. In the early days of discussing skills, companies would buy Degreed or Edcast or Cornerstone or wherever it was. They would turn it on. Or they would buy Saba. They used to do this. You guys remember Saba? They're kind of hard to find these days. They're kind of crawling around inside a Cornerstone somewhere. And they would build a competency model. And they would try to use that to train and hire and certify people inside the company. Well, it turns out that data is imperfect, because that only has information about the skills inside of our company. What about the skills of the things we don't do yet, or the things that are changing in our industry, or the skills that are coming from new technologies, or the skills that are coming from new regulations that we need to adapt to? The skills technology, or the skills engine, really has to be an open system. And so as we got to know some of you and got to know what Eightfold was doing, what we realized is that this isn't just a skills cloud that figures out what the skills are. This is an open platform. This is a platform that's going to be getting new data, new information from other sources of your company and other sources of data from the outside, and then pulling it together into this intelligent database. And there's lots of many types of data. One of the things that you find when you start going through the kinds of projects we just did with GWI, and you can go through in your company, is you realize that your organization structure or your job architecture might be in the way. I mean, BNY Mellon, I don't know if anybody from BNY Mellon is here, but one of Eightfold's early customers went through one of these analyses of different job roles inside BNY Mellon and found that there were project managers in 5 different areas of the bank doing the same work with different job titles. There were product managers in 4 or 5 areas of the bank doing the same job with different titles, and on and on and on. And what he did as a result of looking at this data is he went back to the HR technology group and he said, we need to look at the job architecture here, because we've got these jobs that are sort of similar that are not really aligned with each other. Not only do we want to treat these people the same way, we actually want to bring them together and let them talk to each other about the capabilities they need in the future, so we don't have one group learning something and another group learning something else in the same domain. So job architecture becomes part of this too. And so that's really what's going on, is thinking about the talent intelligence system not as a recruiting tool or a training tool. Yes, it does that too, but as really a new system of record in a way. Now, I don't want to get in trouble with Workday or Oracle or SAP and tell everybody that Eightfold is a system of record, but in some ways it is. This is a very, very valuable data set to your company, and if you take care of it and you use it, it could end up being as important or more important than the system in the core, the data in the core system of record. So that's certainly where I see it. Now, how do you get there from here? So a little bit about how we do talent intelligence, where does it fit, who does it. So there's a couple of reasons why I think all this has happened. There's two trajectories that converged on this. The first is the technology trajectory. So some of you may know I spent 10 years at IBM. I spent 8 years at Sybase. So I was involved in data systems for a long time. I was involved in the early implementations and deployment of business objects and SBase and multidimensional database and some of these analytics systems. And what happened in technology was we had core database technology and ERP. Then we had all these analytics tools that were layered on top of them in that second category. And then Google and Facebook and some other really smart people at Stanford came up with this idea of these massively parallel systems. By the way, Teradata had done this many years earlier, but Teradata was mostly sold into retail. It wasn't really in the social area. And then these systems captured not just static data out of a relational database, but relationship data, because they were dealing with social networking data. And so they became available, and along comes the cloud. And so this stuff over here got put into the cloud. So you can go out and buy from Amazon, from Google, from Microsoft, world-class, parallel, unbelievable database technology for like $5 a month. And you can just stick data in there, and you can get the levels of performance that Google does on their platform. And all of these companies, by the way, these are companies that have all grown. This one got bought by the way, they got bought by Workday. Workday's not stupid. They know this is going on, so they went out and just bought one of these companies because they couldn't build it themselves. Along comes Eightfold, and Eightfold says, let's use this new technology platform to build a new intelligent data system. This would not have been possible back then. It was impossible. You could not have done this in the old technology. So this technology came along and led us to where we are. The second thing that happened is the business world changed. So if I go back to my early days as an analyst in the early 2000s, when I used to go talk to analytics groups, and Stacia, you remember this, there used to be these little geeky groups in HR. There were a couple of guys playing around with Excel, doing statistical analysis and SPSS, and they were the HR analytics group, or they were the learning analytics group. And I would go to meetings of them, and they would all talk about how important their work was, but nobody paid attention to anything they were doing because no one really cared. And companies were happy to just get a record count of how many employees we have and what is our turnover rate, and if we can get some of that basic data, you guys can go do your little thing in the closet, and if it's interesting, we'll let you come out and tell us about it. That was what it was like, when I started. And that started to pick up speed. We had the sort of recession in 2008. We had the issues of turnover. People started to look at employee engagement, and that group grew, and it became what we called people analytics. And people analytics evolved, and I've been involved in dozens and dozens of conferences on this, and HR departments said, you know what, it isn't just HR data, it's business data, it's engagement data, it's sentiment data, it's employee feedback, survey data. Let's bring that all together and look at it. And so we have these people analytics groups in most companies, and there are different levels of maturity, that have been pulling this data together and trying to figure out what it means and what's going on in our company. Along comes the big cloud and all the data systems from companies like Eightfold, and that's where we are. Because all of the things these guys are figuring out here also have relationship to the job, the skills, the labor market, the geography, the weather. In some companies, the weather has a huge impact on the talent and issues going on in the company. The local inflation rate, the regulatory change that took place in this city or this state or this country, that's all important too. And so what talent intelligence is, in some ways, it's the natural growth of this desire to get a better handle on the data about our company and our people in a more sophisticated way. So I think this is inevitable. I just don't see any way you're not going to do this. Now, how do you get there from here? It turns out you got to go through some steps. In order to do people analytics, you had to clean up the data. You had to have a system of record. You had to have a data dictionary. I remember having a lot of meetings with companies that didn't even have a data dictionary. They didn't have a single definition of what turnover meant. I mean, this was not that long ago that we were dealing with sort of the basics of just getting data organized. Then we realized, well, all the data inside the company is good, but what about the data outside the company? How are we going to bring that in? How are we going to match that data too? So we went through that, and now we're at a world where you have the opportunity to do all of this using platforms like Eightfold, and go even further and do analysis of the workforce, look at economic data, look at labor market data, and so forth. And that's really what's going on. Where do you get this data? It's all over the place. I've been getting involved now in talent intelligence working groups in different companies, and they're finding data everywhere. If you're an oil company, you have data in that domain. If you're a manufacturer, you have data in that domain. There's lots and lots of data. One of the guys I was talking to last week is that he's the head of talent intelligence at Amazon. They don't have Eightfold yet, but I'll make sure you guys talk to them. And he's looking at city by city economic data to figure out who to hire, what skills we need, what are the labor market issues we're going to have in every city of the world. This is one guy. He's a smart guy. He's an analyst type of guy, but and they get a lot of help, in the tech side for him. And so there's lots of sources of data for this, and that's why I think this is going to be such an interesting domain. Is it happening? Yes. I went onto LinkedIn 2 weeks ago or last week, and I looked for jobs with the title Talent Intelligence. There were 4,000 jobs that mentioned talent intelligence. Now, the vast majority of them were recruiting, because the first place people tend to think about talent intelligence is as sourcing. And that may be the highest ROI of this domain at the moment, until the economy slows down, and then you might think about it a little bit differently. But you're building your expertise and your awareness and your knowledge of how to use this data in that process. So I think you're going to see this grow. How does it actually shake out? Generally speaking, I'm finding that talent intelligence has 4 really domains. The first is recruiting. How do we better find people? Where can we source? Where are we growing versus shrinking? Who are the best candidates? Who's coming to work for us? Who's not coming to work for us? Who are the silver medal candidates? How do we bring them back in? The second domain is training. All the issues with skilling, development, career paths, those are really, in some sense, data problems of understanding where we want people to go. So there's massive amounts of work there. That second group is usually headed by the CLO. The first group is usually headed by the chief recruiting or head of talent acquisition. The third is, no, I have this backwards, retaining, the third one. The second one is this issue of retention. That's in people analytics. And the fourth one is redesigning. So let me talk about the bottom for a minute. Of all of the things we've studied in the last 2 or 3 years since I left Deloitte, the most interesting research project we did was on organizational design, which is kind of a geeky, boring topic. Most people don't even want to think about it. And what we found is that most HR departments are not very good at organization design. They have a person or a small team that looks at spans and layers and sort of figures out where there's too many people and not enough managers or vice versa. But they really don't do job analysis. They don't really look at productivity. They don't get into business units and look at redesigning the business around the new business model or the new platforms. But that's coming out of talent intelligence too, because what a lot of these talent intelligence groups find is that we're recruiting an awful lot of people into jobs that I don't think we're going to need in a year or two. Are you sure those are really the people we should be recruiting? You're going to have the talent intelligence person or function sees that kind of activity and could presumably go back to the hiring manager or the group that's doing the hiring and say, you know, let's talk about what you guys are trying to accomplish, and maybe we need to spend some time rethinking the way this group is set up before we hire a bunch of people into these open positions. So I think this is both an analytics and planning function, a sourcing, recruiting, and training function, but also a strategic, really design function for the organization. How are you going to set this up? Well, in most companies I've talked to over the years, the whole domain of analytics grows over time. And this org chart came out of some work I did a long time ago with a large consumer retailer. And so this is an interesting story, so I just want to tell you this. So this is a company this is at least 10 years ago, that was facing labor unions. And they have all sorts of home improvement stores all over the United States. And so one of the heads of HR was given this job. You need to figure out what's going on with this labor movement and get in there and figure out what we need to do to stop it. So he immediately goes, I don't have any data. I don't know why people are talking to the labor unions. I don't know what they're unhappy about. I don't know who's unhappy. I don't know what cities it's in. I don't know what managers. I need data. So he put together, he was actually an ex-Microsoft guy, so he was really into data. He put together this analytics team, and they started doing all sorts of engagement surveys, looking at data by city, by geography, by tenure, by manager. And he figured out what were the issues in that particular company that were exposing them to a possible unionization. And he built this project and took it to the senior leaders, I think the CEO or the CFO or some of the senior executives, and they said to him, all right, great. You have full reign to build out the team to do this in a much bigger way. And he ended up building out this sort of analytics, talent intelligence function. He didn't call it talent intelligence. I think they called it workforce analytics at the time. But that tends to be what happens, is you start with a project to study a thing or a problem, and it grows and grows over time. And one of the things that I've learned about doing analytics and running a business that does this is you want these people together. You want them talking to each other. You don't want the recruiting analytics guy and the learning analytics girl and the engagement person and the person looking at retention all doing their own thing completely independent of each other. You want them to share information because they're all learning things that the other group is going to use. So I think it won't be long, and I'll bet this will be true in a year or two, that you're going to have an organization like this, and they're going to become really instrumental in planning all of the HR and technology and people investments you make going forward. And you're not going to do it all at once. This chart didn't quite work out, but I was trying to basically draw this picture of assembling the plane in flight. You're going to have to do a bunch of things at the same time. And this is the way all these new domains of HR are created. They sort of start with very creative, pioneering companies, and some really smart people get things off the ground, and then other organizations slowly build other pieces along the way. Now, the final thing I want to conclude with, I've got one more minute and then I'll stop, is how do you get there from here? I mean, this is a lot. I just told you a whole bunch of stuff, and you're probably saying, wow, what a great idea. I don't even know where we start. How do we get there from here? What we found is that there's 3 ways to get this off the ground. Number 1, go to some part of the business that's underperforming today and get a project started to do this kind of work in that part of the business. You will have no shortage of interest. You'll have business people and financial people who will want to help you do the work. The second is, where are we going in the future? Are we we talked yesterday with Vodafone about the need to hire 7,000 software engineers. Are you an oil company trying to move into hydrogen? On and on and on. Figure out what that big talent gap is and deploy your resources, including Eightfold, around that. The third is, we're transforming and we need a plan on how to get to where we want to go next. You go to Intel, who's trying to build a whole new generation of chips. Intel's come to the conclusion that if we don't know AI a lot better than we do today, we're not going to build chips to compete with NVIDIA. So they're building a massive program across the company to introduce and embed AI into everything they do. This is how you get this started, not, you know, sort of boiling the ocean. And I think this really is the future of HR. Amongst the many things that we're trying to do in HR, including deploying and developing and improving the skills of the HR profession itself, I think this is going to be one of the most exciting things of all. One more thing, let me just wrap up and I'll stop. You know, as I was listening to, you know, CNBC this morning, and, you know, the stock market's cratering again, and the interest rates are going up, and all the, you know, weird things going on, I think one of the other reasons to think about this is we're not going to be in this growing economy forever. Right now, there's too many jobs and not enough people. But I would be willing to bet that a year from now, the world is going to look very, very different. And your problems aren't going to be sourcing and recruiting. They might be retention and redeployment, or they might be something different. And if you don't build this kind of capability, you won't be ready for the next business cycle. So this is a capability that I think you can use in any conditions your company is going through, any change your company adapts. And I want to thank Eightfold for helping us, you know, really develop this whole new initiative in business and HR.